think it's fantastic that there's a lot of young people here. I'm obviously not that young, I'm 40, and I'm a mother, and I'm a council worker, I'm a teaching assistant in a local school. And when Kate sort of approached me and said, would you speak about the Feminist Manifesto, I've tried to think about how related to me in my life and to the women that are around me, and how today we can actually take up as ordinary women the fight for feminism and the fight for women's rights. Hi Sam, you alright? Basically, I grew up in the 1970s. I come from a very working class town in Doncaster, a mining village. My dad were a miner, he loved Benny Hill, he were a completely sexist pig, but you know, there you go. My mum, she'd give up work, she'd give up work to look after 2 children myself. Very intelligent woman, but you know, found herself being at home, just going shopping every day and taking kids to school. And what was very interesting is, I grew up obviously surrounded by lots of supportive women, and both of them, as long as I knew them, lived at home. They didn't go out to work, not like me. You know, it was a generation where women weren't, nothing much was expected of them. But the stories they told, week by week, month by month, to me and my brother, was ones of a time where they were actually involved in society. They were workers. My nana worked in service. She worked for a rich family in a stately home, and then she was drafted into the war, and she was women against the, she was in the Women's Air Force. And then my mum often talks about the time when, you know, she worked before school. So we had school stories, and then we had work stories, and then it ended. And I think, you know, luckily for me, as the women I grew around, even though their life choices were limited, and we're not talking a long time ago, we're talking 1970s, they had a view of themselves as more than just housewives, as more than just mothers. And so, I think I'm quite lucky, and what I want to sort of argue is, for all of us here, I think it's very important for us to hold onto views and to read about the feminist movement, and to know that we are more than just mothers and, you know, glamorous people, and that once we start to challenge them ideas and we realise that we can offer more, that will be vital to the movement that we're going to be going to, the fights that we're going to be going into over the next 10 years. An example I want to talk to you about is how my mum, as I'm talking about, you know, an housewife, because she knew she was worth more than that, because she was aware that her husband worked in a low-paid job, he was a miner, that he understood that the government was going to attack them and going to attack the communities and destroy, you know, their way of life. Because she understood a lot of this stuff, it was valuable when the miners' strike actually came in 84, 85. And what was very good is that she realised that straight away she had a role to play, other than that traditional role. So she went out into the community and she helped set up Women Against Pit Closures. Now, what was very interesting is, even though this was quite a radical move, straight away she then had to have another fight, that she didn't just have to be the cook, that she could actually organise a demonstration alongside the men, that she could organise demonstrations in a town, that she could be more than just a cook again. And I think what made her life better and what helped to shape the movement better was the fact that she had ideas from the suffragettes, from the women you're talking about in the 1960s. Even though her life choices were limited, she carried those ideas, and then as soon as she had the opportunity to bring them into play, she could. And I think that's what we sort of need to do at this moment in time. I think we do need to be sort of challenging the ideas of pole dancing and stuff like that. Now, what happened then in the 1980s? The fact that women then went out and they started to be involved in campaigns, there were Women Against Pit Closures, and they got involved in CND, Campaign Against Nuclear Disarmament. They started to change their ideas. Families couldn't go back to what they were. and so therefore, you know, well, my parents split up, my mum went to university, and I think women then decided they wanted to go out, they wanted to have more, they wanted to go to work. And the family life I have now is completely different to the generations before. We still have some of the similar problems, but it is changed. Women now, majority of women work, even if it's part-time work, they work. And often women are stopped from working because we've still got a lack of childcare. I think the problem that we face still though is the fact that women's work is shaped by our role of the family. Now a lot of women here may not have children, but as soon as you have children, you know, all of a sudden you will find that you have the burden of worrying about your job, people talk about the career ending, you know, you become impoverished straight away. And but I also think even if you've not got children, some of the jobs that you choose to do, or you led down a path of women's jobs. So for instance, I work in a school, majority of us are women. Why? Because society says that we're more caring. Now I work with a lot of women teachers, I've seen a lot of women teachers, they are not always caring. And I think we can maybe remember some of our female teachers as well, and I apologise if there's any female teachers here. But, and I think the other point I sort of want to make as well is that we are working more, but have we really benefited in the system? So for instance, you find that more women are working, but if you work full time, majority of working class women still earn 17% less than a man on the same job. And if you're a part-time worker like myself, because teaching assistants don't get full-time contracts, they just don't get them, you can earn up to 30% less than a man. I mean, that is systemic sexism, that is institutional sexism in the system that says that women, when they go to work, deserve to be paid less. Now, that can also, the job I'm a teaching assistant and I'm also a steward in a school and I'm the women's officer as well, so I deal a lot with statistics, and one of the most awful statistics that I come across is that 1 in 3 children still live in poverty. And just thinking about this meeting, 1 in 3 children live in poverty precisely because I earn less than £10,000 a year. If I were paid a decent wage, you know, my children would be elevated out of poverty, and their life chances would be better. I've got 3 children, 1 child's at university. We know there's no money in the pot for the 2 other children out there. We already told them, God knows how they feel, they'll be 18 as when we're older, but that is the case, there's no money for the 2. And sadly, you know, I come from a Labour Party family. Sadly, under Brown and Blair, this has continued, and it's got worse. The gap between the rich and poor have got worse, and so this is why we still have, they promised, I don't know if anybody remembers, but Brown promised to end child poverty. I don't know what year he said, but even now, the goalposts have moved. And the TUC recently released a statistic that says that for equal pay, for us to have equal pay, it's going to take 50 years. Well, we know with what's coming, it's going to be put back even more than 50 years. And I don't think we can afford to wait for this gradual idea that society progresses, because I actually think that for my family and for the families around me in my neighbourhood and who I work with, it's going to be, it's regressing already. It started to regress under Blair and Brown, and I think it's going to continue.